Welcome to another episode of the Para Cave podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Para Cave.
And today on the podcast, another special guest joining the ranks of those that have come before him. A former referee in the NRL, 239 games, referee between 2008 and 2018. Worked at the NRL with the elite referees, coaching and preparing them to officiate each and every week, and is now the GM of Elite Refereeing at Football Australia, looking after the A-League men's and women's programs. Welcome to the Para Cave podcast, Mr. Alan Shortall.
G'day, Troy. Great to be on here. I'm really excited to have a chat with you today about all things footy. That'll be exciting.
No worries. Well, thank you very much for joining me. And look, let's before we get into the rugby league side of things, let's start off with your current role with Football Australia. A big change from rugby league, which has no doubt been a big part of your life. Why the change over to Football Australia?
Pure opportunity, Troy. Sport is difficult. It's a challenging space to be in, and if you want to grow, sometimes you might have to find where those small gaps are. Like, that's a bit of an analogy from a game, but there was a small opportunity, and I wanted to grow, and Football Australia have given me an opportunity, which is great. And as you say, 19 years at the NRL, like, it was a long period of time, and I've loved rugby league for that period. And they were great to me. They grew me and made me the person that I am. So I'm very thankful to those guys and girls who looked after me and worked through that. But my opportunity lies with Football Australia, and that's pretty exciting as well too, because I think there's a lot of growth within football. They've got some opportunities, and we're creating change. My boss is John Moss, former EPL referee. He's a very experienced guy in football, but he's been a great pleasure to work with for the first 2 months. So I'm really looking forward for both of us to get stuck in for some pre-season planning for next year once this season's finished.
What do you see as the biggest challenges coming up in the near future for Football Australia?
Probably not so many challenges, but just the opportunity. Probably the biggest challenge is the great opportunity, right? Okay, so there's so much we could do, but there's only so many resources. There's only so many people that we have. So it's just trying to work out what's the priority and how we get the best out of each and every official that we've got in our space. And it's really, we've got individual A-League men and A-League women programs, so that's exciting. There's a little bit of a step forward from where I've been previously. So I'm really excited. And the other part is it's challenging because you don't sit in front of them. Where I dealt with guys and girls in front of me for they're 17, 18 full-time referees at the NRL. In FA, they're not in front of you, so you've got to really work hard to build relationships, particularly when you're at games and that type of stuff. So it's that's a challenge, but it's an exciting one to try and work through.
So is that the biggest differences between rugby league and football?
Yeah, probably. Obviously, the rules are different. There's some little idiosyncrasies I've got to get across. But in my first 2 months at FA, there's massive similarities in the refereeing space. They're great at what they do. Their craft, how they go about things. Those type of things are very similar to NRL refs. They're not dissimilar. They've got similar challenges, some of the criticism that comes and dealing with those type of things. But that they are good at what they do. They're successful at what they do. Yeah, we've got some really good, the guys in our ALM program at the top end are FIFA and AFC referees. Okay. So there's some successful guys and girls who are working really well. And Casey Rowbelt particularly, she's our top female referee at the moment. So they're pushing the boundaries of where they want to be at. So really successful group of people at the moment, and we're hoping we can provide some opportunity for them to be better as they go along.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I must admit I'm not much of a football fan. I still call it soccer myself, but I do watch. I try to watch the Australian games, that's for sure. And I was particularly really keen a few years ago when the the name is just the female women's team has just slipped my mind.
What is?
That's the one. How could I forget that? But I was really on board for them in that recent home World Cup, and look, hopefully they can go further in the next one.
Yeah, fingers crossed. They're going all right. They're building up again, so we'll see how they play out. The Women's Asian Cup is next year, so hopefully they do successfully well.
Can't believe I forgot their name. I apologise. I apologise.
No, that's all good.
Matildas. Well, something that I do know what I hopefully am talking about, and that's rugby league. How did rugby league come into your life back in the day?
Funnily enough, it was purely at school. A mate of mine, Ben Bailey, you might remember him from back in the day. He played for Wenny Magpies. He and I went to school together. At the St Anthony's at Girraween in the Para. So I'm from the Parramatta area. That's where I grew up.
Yep.
They brought rugby league to the schools in the convent competition. So and we signed up together. And him and his dad said, "Do you want to come along to a Parramatta versus Roosters game?" It was at the SCG, 1983. I'm going back that far.
Nice year, that one.
I don't remember if Parramatta won that day, Troy, but that was sort of our first. Rugby league started there for me, and I played football for up until I was 12. I played for no, it's actually till I was 10. Sorry, because I left St Anthony's and went to St Pat's at Strathfield. So finished when I was 10, and then didn't come back to rugby league till I was about 14. I went and played at Blacktown Workers Club. Won a couple of premierships with that, and then trialled at Penrith when Craig Gower was playing.
Okay, yeah.
At Penrith, so. I was good. I was a fullback, and then in my last couple of years, I was more a hooker, and then didn't quite get there. So when I realised I probably wasn't going to play rugby league as a professional, like most people want to do, one of the things I remember doing, and I remember Jason Robinson, who was a good mate of mine now. He was refereeing some of my games, so probably tells you how old Jason is, right? But I remember him being on the sideline and didn't know who he was at the time, but we sort of worked that out as we went along. And I thought, we'll give this a crack. So I picked up the phone and, worked your way through it, and decided refereeing was going to be, an opportunity. It was good. You got paid money on a weekend. You didn't have to flip burgers at McDonald's. You made some good mates. I've got long life friends from rugby league refereeing. And then ultimately, about 3 years into it, someone said, "Well, you're pretty good. Let's go into the mats and the ball program."
Okay.
And then basically, I think it was 97 that I got in there. So probably about 6 or 7 years later, I got into the graded squad, as they call it. That was back into, New South Wales Rugby League type programs. And then 2006, full-time contract. And that's where it sort of all grew from. So from one game, Parramatta Roosters, to on the big stage back in 2008.
Well, just going back before refereeing, did you pick Parramatta as your team that you supported?
Funnily enough, initially, yes. Yeah, because...
Well, what do you mean initially? You picked and stick, didn't you?
I am. I am. When I was younger, I lived in Toongabbie.
Okay,
and
yeah.
the people around me, again, I think 83 grand final, they dragged me across and said, "Come over, Alan, you can watch the 83 grand final." And obviously Parramatta won that particular year. So that was my first, that year was my first experience. And Steve Edge was my favourite player. Okay. I had that jersey, the number 12 on the back, all that sort of stuff.
Nice.
But then when I went to St Pat's, I had some mates that literally decided that they loved Penrith and they came from Penrith. So I sort of gravitated towards them a little bit, right?
Okay,
so,
yeah.
And then obviously as you get into sort of refereeing, you sort of you lose interest because you're more focused on the refereeing side of things. So in my kid days, my younger days, there was initially the Parramatta was a team that I did follow for a period of time there, but probably I wasn't as staunch as what I should have been as I grew up, Troy.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. I'm of the belief of picking and sticking, but that's fair enough. Definitely. I mean, I'm a Parramatta fan living in Penrith, so I sort of see both sort of the sides there.
I can imagine.
Now, as you mentioned just before, you made yourself through the ranks and then full-time 2006. Your first grade refereeing debut was in 2008, North Queensland versus Penrith, and very close game. It was 19-18, a Penrith win, Jared Zammit field goal. What are your memories of your debut refereeing game?
There's lots of them, to be honest, and probably more outside the game than inside the game. Um, like where you're never prepared for anything you do in your first game. You can do all the training. We're as passionate as players. We prepare as detailed as players do. We train as hard. We don't take the knocks. We don't make the tackles. All those type of things. So, one of the things I tried to prepare for, and you remember at that time, Jonathan Thurston was the captain of the Cowboys, and for Penrith it was Petro Civoniceva.
Yep.
And whilst I don't think Penrith were going as well as they probably have been in the last 4 or 5 years, Cowboys were sort of up there as well too. But JT at the time was as challenging as any captain was. Like he was literally really challenging. And I spent a whole heap of time preparing for him and what he might throw at me.
Okay. Yeah.
Petro was pretty quiet. Like he didn't say much, but which was typical Petro. But ultimately, it didn't end that way. Like you're obviously going to ask about the send off a little bit later, and I'll leave that for a bit. But one of the things I loved about refereeing first grade was those players who tested you and challenged you, and that was why you did it. Was you wanted to be out there when the pressure was on, the decisions needed to be made. You wanted the ball, as you talk about, you wanted the ball to come to you, so you wanted the decisions to come to you and make you get them right. And as much as you may not always get them right, that was what it was about. So JT was there. I hated flying. I wasn't great at flying, so I tried to think up ways of getting to Townsville without getting on a plane. But we got there. To be honest, probably the fact that the game does go to Golden Point, that they backed me. Billy Harrigan was my video ref at the time.
Okay.
He gives me a ref's call, so I have to make the decision that goes to Golden Point. Like there's bits and pieces within that game that were just critical moments. And Robert Finch was my boss at the time. He was the head of the referees, and and Mick Stone was his sort of second in charge. And he said, "Look, that's a baptism of fire type stuff." And along with a few other games, obviously you always remember your first, but it was a really, really good opportunity to take and sort of settle me in for what was a really good career from my perspective anyway.
And how was it when you had to come to that decision of the send off? How hard was that to make? Yeah,
look, it wasn't challenging in the sense that I had people around me, and I had Matt Chechen and Russ Turner on my touch lines. And as I said, I had Bill Harrigan, who was the video ref. Both of those guys very experienced at what they were doing at the time. And obviously, Chech and I worked together for a long period, particularly 2016, which was my really successful year. They were so supportive. They did a great job. And Russ was the guy who came and reported it at that point. So in some ways, I was almost just the mouthpiece. Like it was like Russ was reporting it. I then had to back up what I'd seen as well too. So we were sort of working together. And then Billy's up in the box telling me, "Yep, I'm backing you. This is a strong decision." So the decision itself, it was like, as JT said, that's a big call. Like those were his exact words. And there's photos of me with it looks like I've got a lollipop in my mouth because I'm trying not to laugh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So going, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. So. Obviously that's the pivotal moment in the game, and look, it was, you always back yourself, you back your judgment, and the other part is that's the other part that people probably don't sort of quite see, is that there's a team of people out in the field who work together to back each other and to make the best possible decisions within the game. So Russ Turner was really pivotal for me in that particular decision, and then throughout my career he was good for me as well too, just like many of the guys and girls I worked with.
Well, your next game was at Parramatta Stadium, Parramatta and Canberra. Parramatta won that game. Throughout your career, what was it like refereeing Parramatta? Was there a dominant person in the Parramatta teams?
It's funny, like this question gets asked to me many times. Like it's like, is there someone, like, to be honest, no. I enjoyed refereeing Parramatta, and the part of the reason why was probably because it was home, right? That was like I'd go on a Friday night. You know what nights were like at Parramatta, the old Parramatta Stadium, and it'd be rocking, and Parramatta were playing really well. So you'd enjoy going and watching the footy. And I had mates of ours, we'd go together and all that sort of stuff. So, but I enjoyed it. Like, and to be brutally honest, it's not. I don't want to be sitting on the fence, but there's no one that stands out where I go far out. They were challenging.
Yeah.
Parramatta were great at that time. I know you're going to talk about Hindy in a bit, but all those players around that particular time they were good to referee, and it was enjoyable to referee Parramatta particularly.
We have seen in the last few years, particularly Mitchell Moses and Clint Gutherson probably being, I guess, called whingers when it comes to decisions and whinging towards the referees. But that's good to hear that they were a pleasure to referee in those times. That's for sure. You mentioned Hindy there, Nathan Highmarsh, one of my favourite ever players. Now, one of the games that you were involved in was his 300th game. That was actually my Bucks night at Penrith back in 2011. Now, the last play in regular time. Now, was that a touch from Penrith, and should that have been play on for Parramatta? Because
I didn't realise you were going to test me out on decisions.
From looking at the vision and look, I haven't watched the game in a long time, but I've seen the quick little highlights. Now, they thought that Penrith touched the ball. That's why they went down with the ball. They were ready to play the ball again, but it wasn't called that way, and then Penrith scored, and then golden point, and then
you'll have to do a part 2, Troy. So this is the hard part, right? You do all these games and the Hindy 300, and I have no idea. Like I can't tell you whether it was or it wasn't right.
Yeah, so fair enough. It's 14 years ago.
Yeah. But like I said, maybe it's a part 2 episode where you bring up the vision and maybe not type stuff. So.
Yeah.
But those are the game. The Parramatta Penrith rivalry was really good. You bring up Hindy in that 300th game, but I don't know if this is the same game where they win on the bell. Like, there's a game I was involved. I think Jared Maxwell was the referee, and I remember sort of seeing that one. So you might tell me if I'm right or wrong, but there was a game where I think Penrith won on the buzzer, or Parramatta, whichever team. But those local derbies were awesome. You used to walk out and at Penrith they were buzzing. I think I did one at Parramatta as well too, and they were typical local derby, tough, challenging, all that sort of stuff. It was really good to referee. So maybe part 2, we'll see.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Were you ever involved in like a Roosters South game or a Parramatta Bulldogs game or any rivalry game in any rivalry games? That are they the sort of games that you loved to referee, especially with the atmosphere and the crowd?
Yeah, 2 come to mind. I always tell the story about the Melbourne Manly game. It was a Monday night, and it was just before they lost all their points, and no one knew. It was at Marvel, the current Marvel Stadium. Tony Archer and I refereed together. Always say that was probably almost the toughest game outside of a prelim final with Chech, the Melbourne-Canberra game. This game this night, I think Melbourne knew they were done for the year. They literally, so you had Smith, Cronk, Slater. I think Inglis was playing at the time as well too. He was a bit quieter, but the other 3 guys really they tested me out that night, and I knew as a first grade referee after that particular game they really pushed hard, and I came off and I literally said nothing for 15 minutes. That's how mentally and physically drained I was, and again that was why we love. That was why we do things like we do what we do, is because of those particular games. The other one was South's Roosters at the old Allianz. I'm pretty sure it's 2012. It's the Warren Smith. You can take me now. I've seen it all when Rabbitohs win on the bell.
Oh, that's right. The length of the field try. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. No one expected that, and they were done, the Rabbitohs. But at the time, Billy Hagan was the boss, and the 2-ref system was different, and I got the opportunity to finish that game. Whereas the 2-ref system sort of moved the other way later in its life. But to refer like to have to referee that part of it, that's probably one of the ones that stand out the most as a really exciting and opportunity. And yeah, you want to be, that's the one where you want the decision. You want to be in the middle of it and be part of that.
Well, fans have always said that Cameron Smith was a referee, an extra referee on the field, so that sort of just backs that up a little bit. But speaking of 1 and 2 referees, you started off as a single referee and then moved into 2 referees. What was the? Did you enjoy having 2 referees on the field, or would you have preferred to just do it by yourself?
This is always a hard question. Like on one side of me, and the hard part is I did a lot of my refereeing as the assistant referee, which was great. But then I watched back, and I think particularly in that early part, there was other games where you did a heap of the game. Um, I didn't mind it. Like I liked refereeing on my own.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. And if you potentially, if you were to ask referees, I think they felt like it was comfortable on their own. I also know, having been through it, that the second referee was so valuable on occasions, like decision making wise, it was such a great backup. We'd always talk about the fact that it took doubt away from you. So whether anyone really agreed with the decision making or not, we always knew that we didn't have doubt.
Okay.
We could clear your doubt. So there's a bit of a balance there. I know my career was based around the 2 refs, so I'd probably lean more towards having the second referee there for a number of different reasons. But ultimately, I think every referee wants to be out there doing their thing. So it depends. It depends on who you ask. But for me, purely because I did a lot of that second referee stuff, I probably lean that particular way.
Do you think we'll ever go back to 2 referees? There has been a little bit of talk about it, but
Maybe. Oh, look, you'd have to come up with a really strong use case for it. I think at the moment the officiating is at a pretty good standard. Like I said, they work really hard to be good at their craft, and from my perspective, they're doing a good job. So whether 2 refs comes in is probably up to those who make that judgment and that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure, because ultimately at the end of the day, if the guys who run the game need to work through what that looks like for the game as it currently stands as well too. But if they see fit to do that, then there'll always be good potential for if they did bring that in again.
And what do you think of the recent rule changes that they've brought in, like especially like the 6 again rule, and the dropout rule as well change that's just recent as well? What do you think about those sort of 2 rules in particular?
Yeah, dropout one.
The ruck infringement one, that can be pretty confusing sometimes as to why, well, not the ruck infringement, but the 6 again can be pretty confusing sometimes as to why a team got a 6 again.
Yeah, that's for game flow from my perspective, my personal opinion. Like you get a whole heap of flow into the game, because then you're not stopping it, right? Because ultimately, as I've speak to many people and do a bit of teaching here and there, sport's a business, right? So all sport are looking for that competitive edge, and having a flowing game of football with a lot of points, or that's ultimately what my thinking is. My thinking around it is around being able to make the game exciting and give great flow to what that looks like. And the more you get that, the more points you score, the more goals you score, is really valuable. So there's probably things that could be evaluated and potentially considered around the set restart scenario. But for me, it creates great flow to any product, and the less impact that referees have on the game, the better. I do actually like the dropout one. I think taking that pressure off a team and creating more opportunity for them to try things, because well know that the dropouts are contested possession. So that's really, again, creates excitement, creates flow. We're not stopping the game too much, and probably the other part is you're not actually creating an opportunity where the game's decided by that. That's probably another thing that was really good from my perspective. So I hope they can, yeah, it looks like they could keep to continuing down that path, and the set restart stuff. Well, again, that the guys and girls who run that will make that determination around what it looks like. So, but I think it's not been a bad thing for rugby league particularly.
Yeah, no, fair call. If you were back working at the NRL, is there a rule that you would bring back potentially that is no longer in the game at all? Or they're fine at the moment as they are?
I reckon. You've made me think now because, but there's not like there's nothing that I would say to you that stuck out where I go, I think we really should drive this particular situation. I think the opportunity, that they will continue to look at things that come along for, to drive the best possible product and things like that. So, no, look. There's always debate. I reckon 5 minutes in bin's an interesting one.
Okay, yeah, that has been talked about.
Interest around what that looks like, from my perspective, in my experience, maybe that's a scenario because, potentially there's a bigger piece around is there 10 minutes too long, that type of stuff. So yeah, maybe that's something to consider down the track.
There's two that I would love to see back, but one of them would probably be too messy, and that's being able to ruck the ball back at marker.
Oh, yes.
And the other one is tap the ball when you've got possession. Tap the ball if there's no markers. But I mean, we generally don't see no markers there these days. They are generally back in place there. So probably wouldn't get the opportunity to do it. Well, you mentioned 2016 was probably your career best season. In 2017, you actually were on standby. You were the standby referee for State of Origin. You did referee a few city-country games. Is it disappointing for yourself not being able to referee a State of Origin game or a grand final?
Probably in the moment it is. Yeah, absolutely. Like, they were the only two things I didn't do. And, 16 was probably the year that I could have refereed a grand final. Like Chetch and I were, we refereed really well that final series. And, the decision was made not to go that particular way. And that, you'll go, I'm always disappointed that I didn't quite get to that point, particularly given the form that I was in. And then 17, look, from that perspective, it would have been great to do Origin and would have been, that they're always that sort of stuff. You would have loved to have done them. But I think one of the things you reflect upon when you finish is those, you don't do it in the moment because you're always consumed by where am I going? What am I doing? Am I getting the games I think I should get? But when you look back on it, you go, all right, I did 200, I think I did, what did you say, 239, something like that. I think I did 3, maybe 4 city countries. Like they're good games. Like I went to different places and again refereed with great mates and that sort of stuff. Like I finished with Ash Klein. We did the last one together, that sort of stuff. So I'll have that as a bit of history for until if they decide to bring it back.
Do you think it'll come back at all, city versus country?
I don't know. It probably had served its purpose. Like it probably had gone away from being that sort of preparation for State of Origin into it's there as a product within the game, another game within the season that's there for content type stuff. So it had value, and as I said, they were tough games to referee, and it was rep level. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether they would bring that back, but I'm sure they can always consider that. So. But yeah, no, it's disappointing. But then when you reflect upon your career, as I said, I think I ended up doing, I think I was talking about it recently, it's like 382 games across touch judging, refereeing, and the bunker as well too. And like, I worried I'd do one, Troy, let alone the number that I did. And to be honest, I see that as a highly successful career. It was not a waste of my time, but at all, it was like, there's lots of people who didn't do one, and I'm really privileged to have been able to walk out there and do what I did for as long as I did.
Is it because of the bunker these days we don't see referees run in with their touch judges run in with their flags up, the reporting stuff? Is that the reason why?
It's a bit like you can work within the team. I think there's a little bit of that they communicate with each other, so they're able to talk to each other on the field. So things that they may not have been able to communicate in the past as technology has grown and how the game's evolved. It's the same in football. The officials are now in most sports are able to talk to each other. So the need to get onto the field is probably not as necessary as it was in the past, because literally the communication piece was I'm coming in, I need to report something. So yeah. It's probably more just a procedural thing that's changed the way we do things.
Yeah, no, it certainly was probably used too much in the 80s, I guess, and probably the early 90s, mid-90s, I guess, but I think Phil Gould did it one day. I remember
when Phil did it. Yeah. I think I saw it on TV. I don't think I was, but I do remember Phil being. And that.
Alan, how you going, mate? Are you a Para Cave podcast listener?
I am, bro. Okay. It's a great podcast. Everyone tune in.
Go Para.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Para Cave Podcast. See you next